Alright lads, welcome back to a new video. I know what you're thinking, a new setting already when we just got used to the new background. Well, let me tell you something, this is going to be a pretty long video, so I decided to just lay myself down and have a chat with you about this summer's transfer window, which has just now closed. Thank fuck it has closed. But let's be honest, this has been the most insane transfer window probably of all time. I want to discuss every single club's business, so again, this is going to be a long one. Sit back, relax and listen to me ranking every single Premier League club's transfer business in the summer of 2025. Let's get into it. We will be going from the bottom all the way to the top, aka the team who I believe has won the transfer window. We will discuss some of their signings, some of their sales, as well as their overall window. If you have a close look in just a few seconds when we talk about the first team, you will see that I also have ranked the incoming signings for every single Premier League club. So a lot of time has crept into this video, both in preparing the video, in recording the video and in editing the video. So please make sure to show your support. Without any further ado, I suggest we start with our bottom ranked team. And the first team I'm going to be talking about, starting us off from the bottom, is unfortunately Burnley. Burnley, I mean, a lot had to be done this summer if they wanted to have any chance at survival, especially after the likes of Trafford, CJ Egan-Riley, Brownhill all left the club. Especially after those names, it's really hard to get a better squad out on the pitch than you had last season, and then add to that the fact that you've just rejoined the hardest league in the world. I think this could be a long old season for Burnley. As for their incomings, however, I cannot believe how they have managed to get their hands on Florentino Luis. If you don't remember, he is someone who has been touted as an exciting defensive midfielder at Portugal for a very long time. He had a stint away from Benfica, I think at Monaco and Getafe in the past, but that didn't really work out for him. But what you do have with him now is someone who has matured, who is very physical, who is an absolute ball winner in the midfield, but also is, his passing volume is insane, and he probably won't be allowed to give as many passes or be on the ball as much when he is in Burnley's midfield, but he also won't have as much team possession as he did at Benfica, and he still had massive defensive output, so I think he could be a Palhinha-esque signing for them. Unfortunately, if I do look at the rest of their business, I think Walker is quite a savvy signing on a free, especially if you're planning on playing a 3-back, because you can have him in that right-sided centre-back role, and he definitely does have the physicality to do so still. Hartman was a pretty cheap deal, I don't mind that one. Humphries already knows the club. Guchuku, again, the fact that what pretty much everyone thinks is going to be the bottom side in this season are still able to field a midfield of Florentino Luis and Uguchuku. The quality in this league is unbelievable, man. Other than that, Burnley brought in the likes of Chuana, Fleming, Anthony Brun-Larsen, Weiss, and the worst transfer I think of all has got to be Armando Broja. That's just such a risk. This guy has only done it at Southampton, really, and that was a couple of seasons ago, where he only scored a couple of goals as well, spent a lot of time out injured. After that, he's failed on loan at Everton, failed on loan at Fulham, and I think paying 20 million for him right now, it's a really big gamble, and I'm doubtful he's going to be paying off, which brings me to the big Burnley question this season. Who the hell is scoring their goals? I'm really sorry, Burnley, you again spent more than 100 million, but I can't really see on what or on whom you spent those pennies. I'm sorry, it's going to have to be an F for me. Right above Burnley in 19th, and unfortunately it's the same grade, but it's also the last club who will receive this grade. It's Brentford. Now, giving Brentford an F does really sound harsh, but let's put this into context. Brentford not only lost Thomas Frank, their manager, this summer, but they have lost Mbuemo, they have lost Visa, they have lost Neurgaard. I think there are a couple other players they've lost, Ben Mee and Roerslev, and Vlekken, obviously, but they've not really done great replacing them, in my opinion. Vlekken out, Keller in is a great bit of business. When that was their first deal of the summer, I immediately thought, yeah, Brentford are back on it yet again. Then Mbuemo went, and I think they overpaid a little for the likes of Dango Ouattara. I mean, they did make Coyote permanent, but he already was there, so that's probably one of their better signings because he did look great last season and is going to continue to look great this season. But you've now spent a lot of money on Dango Ouattara. Henderson has come in, his leadership will be massive in the dressing room, especially given the fact that Frank has also left and you've replaced him with the unproven Keith Andrews. So a leadership figure like Jordan Henderson probably isn't the worst idea in the world at all. But apart from that, Milambo is a signing for the future, Donovan is probably a signing for the future, and I mean, they've also got Reece Nelson on loan. I don't mind it, but is he just going to keep going on loan forever, really? I mean, yeah, everything about this window just screams in my opinion, and I think there is no... In previous seasons you just back Brentford to know what they're doing, have the right idea, but this season I genuinely think their squad has gotten a lot worse compared to how it was last season. Next up, I want to talk about West Ham. Got in the signings of Mateus Fernandes, who is a player I really like. I suggested him for West Ham in one of my videos. He's a really energetic midfielder, and I think energy is one of the things West Ham are lacking in their midfield right now. But they did spend an awful lot of money on him. Between him and making the Todibo deal permanent, they spent about 84 million pounds on those two players, which is eye-watering amounts of money. But apart from that, some other interesting players have come through the door. I think the youth could be absolutely class for them on that left-hand side. He is, I mean, the archetypal left wing-back from 5 years ago who is just bombing up and down the pitch for the whole of 90 minutes. I think that's really exciting for West Ham fans to be getting a player like that, especially because he typically is the polar opposite of what Wan-Bissaka brings to the team, which is defensive stability. I also really like the signing of Mats Hermansen. I know he had a howler at his debut, but he will be absolutely fine. He was a great goalkeeper for Leicester. Magasa is just some legs in the midfield who they absolutely needed, especially given the fact that they didn't pay a lot of money for him. That's a really, really great transfer, maybe even a transfer I put a little low in this personal ranking, but let's just wait and see how he adapts to the Premier League. You've also brought in Kyle Walker-Peters on a free, who is fine squad depth. Callum Wilson on a free. I mean, we saw last weekend he strapped on his knee for one more time and actually delivered a pretty sublime run and finish for West Ham. But that's the real... I mean, there are two very big worries in my opinion with this West Ham squad. For one, Guido Rodriguez and Ward-Prowse in midfield, everyone will just walk through because they can't defend for shit. And the second thing I'm worried about is where are the goals coming from for this West Ham team. Because obviously you have Mr. West Ham, Jared Bowen, but apart from him you have Fulkrug, who had his injury issues last season, and Callum Wilson, who has been having his injury issues for a while. So that is a massive concern in my opinion, especially for a team like West Ham. I think everybody already knows they will be in a relegation scrap, and I don't know if they have done enough to pull themselves out of that. Wolves brought in Strand Larsen, obviously, as Newcastle United tried to poach him away from them after, I mean, just about a month being under contract with them. but he did play for them last season on loan, hence why they didn't make it a permanent deal, or hence why it was a no-brainer to make it permanent, because, I mean, 14 goals, 3 assists in your debut Premier League season is nothing to be sniffed at all. That's why I've got him in the number one, because retaining him was probably the most important thing Wolves could do in their bid for survival this season. Apart from that, they signed Krejci from Girona, who is now an experienced centre back who played some Champions League minutes last season, played La Liga minutes, is, I believe, 27 years old, so that is a good signing, especially given the fact he is left-footed, and that's something they needed a bit more quality in, those left-footed sided centre backs. Arias, who a lot of people will know from the Club World Cup, has come in. He is an exciting player, but I'm curious to see how European football will suit him. Tolu Arokodare from Genk has also joined them, or Genk as we call it in Belgium. He was last season's top scorer in the Belgian Pro League, but I mean, a lot of players have gone on to achieve great things in the Belgian Pro League and then kind of disappear. Think about Gibbs Orban, think about Wesley, think about Emmanuel Dennis. Those players do thrive here and then suck afterwards, but I don't think Tolu is going to be one of these players. He seems like one of these guys with a natural instinct for finishing. Paul Onuachu also didn't really work out in England, but I think that's more of a Southampton problem, because in Turkey and in the other leagues he's played in since, he's absolutely smashed it, so there is clearly a quality striker there, and I think the same can be said for Tolu, so that's a pretty okay signing by Wolves. Fer, I mean, remains to be seen. Am I missing anyone out? Wolf, Chachua, Mane. Yeah, it hasn't really been a really glamorous window for Wolves. Add to that the fact you've lost Mateus Cunha, Ait Nouri, who probably were your two best players. You've lost Fabio Silva, who, I mean, they haven't used him for the last 2 years, but he did apparently have a great season at Las Palmas last season. And you've now sold him to Dortmund. Gonçalo Guedes has been gone. Semedo has gone. Pablo Sarabia has gone. So a lot of experience has left this team as well, which is a big worry for me if you're Wolverhampton Wanderers, because you do want to keep those players around who have been there, who have kept Wolves in the league. I think this season it could be a struggle for them as well. The same as West Ham. I'm giving them a D-. Fulham, if it weren't for deadline day, this would be a really short segment. They, I mean, stayed quiet all summer, and I think if you did so because you are looking to spend big next summer in a period where other teams will likely have to settle with the big buys they made last summer and have to bank on those coming good instead of spending big bucks yet again, because I mean, a summer like this, I think and I kind of hope that this was an anomaly and we won't get this kind of crazy cinema ever again, because I mean, that's exactly what it was, absolute cinema. As for Fulham, however, they did before deadline day do the transfer of Lecomte, who has now come in. I mean, last season's backup goalie for Fulham was absolutely horrific, if Fulham fans are to be believed, and Lecomte has buckets full of experience out of the league, so I don't mind that signing at all. On deadline day, however, they did make two really exciting deals. One is Kevin from Shakhtar Donetsk, who, I mean, what era are we living in where a Brazilian, flary, speedy baller coming through to Europe through to the Shakhtar routes, I mean, a well-trodden path by Brazilian youngsters, and his name is Kevin. Yeah, you couldn't write it in my opinion, but he does look like a really class player. That burst of pace that he has on him is something I believe not a lot of Fulham players have, because they do have these more hybrid wing fielders without pace in Iwobi, Harry Wilson. I mean, that's the kind of player I'm associating with Fulham, but now with bringing in Kevin and Samu Chukwueze from AC Milan on loan, who will bring a lot of the same things, but on a different side, which is, I mean, a great option for Marco Silva to have in a season where he is waiting probably about 12 months to reinvest heavily in this squad. He just has some people, some folks to revive an attack before it got stale. I think that's a really smart idea. They also haven't really sold a lot of players, but if you look around them, all of the teams have gotten better. And then, I mean, all of the teams around the area where Fulham want to be, they haven't necessarily gotten a lot better. So I'm only going to give this window a D, but it's a D with me looking forward to their next summer window, because I do think that's where they are spending the big bucks. My next team is going to get a D plus already, which still probably isn't that great, but if it weren't for the last week of the transfer window, it would have probably been an F. I'm talking about Aston Villa. Now, Aston Villa is again one of those teams who haven't really lost a lot of players. They did lose Jacob Ramsey to Newcastle, a player, I mean, if we have to believe the reports from the likes of Tyrone Mings, John McGinn, he was a player they absolutely did not want to let go of, but they had to because of PSR reasons. And now they've brought in some, let's say, interesting players. First of all, Harvey Elliott is a transfer I really, really do like. He is someone I would have loved to see Newcastle bring in as well, because he can cover both on the wing and in that number 10, number 8 role, being creative in that zone 14, which is such an unbelievably important zone, as you all know. But apart from that, I mean, the signings are kind of meh, in my opinion. Evan Guisson, fine, can cover striker and on the wing, absolutely fine signing, didn't have to pay a lot for him. Marco Bizot, I mean, Unai Emery is clearly a big fan, but if he is that great of a goalkeeper remains to be seen, especially if he will be able to replace Dibu, who is still there, but I mean, is he going to want to play for Aston Villa without kicking up a fuss again? Is he going to kick up a fuss again about leaving in January? Who knows? And then the big one. Oh, Lindelöf on a free, but Sancho on loan. Now we all know Sancho is a player with the capability to be absolutely worthwhile, but Aston Villa's biggest problem last season is their wage. There isn't necessarily a numerical wage cap in the Premier League, but there is a wage cap on the fact that you can only spend about 70% of your wage or of your revenue on wages. And Villa last season were at 90%, which is near on criminal. But they then managed to get Rashford off the books, they managed to get Asensio off the books, they managed, or actually weren't able to make those transfers permanent deals because of their wages. I mean, the same can probably be said for Disasi. Now those players are gone. You've also let Leon Bailey go. You finally ended the contract of Coutinho, who was somehow still an Aston Villa player. Dundonker has gone, Barrenetxea has gone, Kessler Hayden has gone. None of these players will have been on massive wages, but they will all help in tightening up that wage budget. And then you sign Jadon Sancho on loan, who is on probably £300,000 a week at Manchester United, and you agree to pay 80% of his wages. What are you doing, Aston Villa? What are you doing? This summer has been all about you not being able to spend, not being able to compete with the teams around you. And then you put yourself in another financial black hole by bringing in a player who will probably barely contribute to your season, but eats up the most wages out of any player in your squad. I really don't like that signing at all. And again, Sancho does have the potential to make good on his promise, but not in these kind of circumstances, not with these kind of criteria, in my opinion. My number 14, and I think I am going to get some slack for this, but hear me out. It's Manchester United. Now, Manchester United started off this window very brightly, bringing in Matheus Cunha, bringing in Brahim Mbuemo, bringing in Šeško, but if we put this into perspective, and I found it really hard to rank these transfers because I do genuinely believe individually they are all class players they've brought in, but you've now refurbished your attack for 200 plus million pounds without having a way to get the ball to your attack. I've put Cunha at the number one because I think he's looked the best this far out of the Manchester United signings, and he probably will have the best season out of the Manchester United signings. But I think that's a sign of the lack of structure and cohesion in your squad, more so necessarily than just Cunha being your best player. Because I think if there is a structure at play, if players do understand your system, if this is a winning well-drilled machine, then I think Mbuemo and Šeško are more useful parts than Mateus Cunha is. Because Mateus Cunha is one of these players where if it's a dull, stalemate game, he can just pick up the ball from deep and make something happen out of nothing. Whereas these other players kind of need a system around them in which they can thrive. But is Manchester United really the kind of club that now needs to go looking for these players who can do it on their own? Who don't need a system? No. Manchester United can't take peace with this. And I mean, they didn't score many goals last season, but I don't think any Manchester United fan would have told you that the attack was their sole or even biggest problem last summer. It is the midfield. It is that partner of Bruno Fernandes. And who is going to fill that role? Probably Ugarte and Casemiro for one more season, because you've bid for Baleba, who is exactly the kind of player who should be looking for. But it was a little late in the window. Brighton said, no, we're not interested in selling this summer, probably because they know there is going to be competition for his signature next summer from the likes of Manchester City, Liverpool, probably even from abroad. But Manchester United just chose, okay, then we're not signing a midfielder and not signing a wingback and not signing a central defender. And they've just brought in Senne Lammens on deadline day, who, I've said it before, I think is exactly the kind of deal Manchester United should be looking to do. But it's the context around it makes it such a pressure situation yet again, because you've now sent out Andre Onana on loan to Trabzonspor. You've brought in a 21-year-old goalkeeper who made the most saves out of any keeper in Europe last season, but he did do that playing for Royal Antwerp in Belgium, and I think they are pretty shit. But this is a big risk to put him into the biggest spotlight probably you can be on if you're a goalkeeper in Europe. It is a massive risk. All of their signings are risks. They haven't addressed nearly as many positions as they should have done at the start of the summer, instead spanking loads amount of money on players who maybe don't even fit the system. I mean, Mbuemo, where does he really fit in this Amorim system? Šeško, have we really seen him play greatly? And especially, the thing with Šeško is, I was already worried about him when he was starting to be linked with Newcastle, because I would like to see more shots coming from an attacker from the Bundesliga, and now he's going to be playing on an island in that number 9 role for Manchester United, getting even less service, and I think he could really struggle. I think they could all really struggle for Manchester United yet again. We do have to talk about their fire sales, however. Garnacho has gone, Rashford has gone. Rashford has only gone on loan, true. Anthony has gone, Sancho has gone, Wheatley has gone, Højlund has gone, Lindelof has gone, Eriksen has gone, Evans has gone. That was something that had to be done with Manchester United, so I think that bumps their window up from an F to a D+, but it's still massively disappointing. In at number 13, and in my opinion a massive indication on why this Manchester United team should be ashamed of, or not necessarily the team, but the Manchester United board should be ashamed of themselves, because I am giving the exact same grade to promoted side Leeds United. They have done some interesting business. I think bringing in Anton Stak is the best transfer out of any promoted Premier League side, and I know Sunderland have brought in the likes of Granit Xhaka, for example, but Stak is, I mean, he is a one-man army in that midfield. Does the defensive work, does creative work, plays long balls, plays short passes. He is absolutely fantastic. Gudmundsson on their wing has looked really bright as well. They've replaced Ilan Meslier with a goalkeeper who, I mean, has bags of experience now from playing in the league. Leeds have had a really interesting window. Longstaff, James Justin, Dominic Calvert-Lewin will all bring them buckets of Premier League experience, because I think between them they must have about 200 appearances in this league, which bringing that in for a lot of money, for not that much money, is a great signing in my opinion, especially if you're one of these promoted teams. Okafor is a signing with a lot of pace behind him. Biol is a great signing. They both come from the Serie A, who I believe physically prepare their players well enough for the Premier League. I mean, they don't necessarily do that with a mind to prepare them for the Premier League, but I think Serie A players are physically prepared to play in the Premier League, if you know what I'm on about. Bornau has come in. I think Nmecha is the most risky signing out of the lot, but that's simply due to his injury record, because I do think there is an impressive player in there. And Leeds United haven't really sold massively. Christensen has gone, but he was already out on loan. Greenwood has gone, but the same can be said for him. Firpo is a massive loss for them, but I think Gudmundsson is a more than good enough replacement, and we've seen Firpo struggle in the Premier League before. I think C-, the same as I gave Manchester United, is probably about right. In at number 12 is Crystal Palace, and I must admit I feel a little bit sorry for this Crystal Palace team, because what they did achieve last season was absolutely massive, winning their first trophy in the club's career, but that also does mean there is a magnifying glass on your squad, with a lot of parties from Europe probably being interested in your players. Now, given the fact that they only really, out of their massive names, lost Eberiche Eze, who, I mean, we all knew he was probably looking for a move this summer, because it kind of was this summer or never, especially right before a World Cup year, especially when his boyhood Arsenal came calling. He had to leave. Everybody understands that transfer, probably, apart from Spurs fans maybe, but they did lose Alston Edouard, Rob Holding and Jeffrey Schlupp, who, I mean, none of them were big contributors or contributors at all to their team last season. So it only really is one big sale. They've replaced that big sale with bringing in Jeremy Pino, who I really like, from Villarreal. But you've not really done a lot of business apart from that, and it doesn't really matter how much you got shafted by UEFA by not being allowed to play in the Europa League and having been demoted down to the Conference League, but you're still playing Conference League. Then only bringing in Uche, who is a really interesting player and has seen a meteoric rise over the past couple of seasons. Canvo, who is a massive risk, massively unimproven. Sosa, who I personally really like, because he's shown a lot of potential throughout a couple of seasons, but has been on the dole at Ajax Amsterdam for I think 2 years now. And you've brought in Walter Benitez. Ideally, I would have liked to see 1 or 2 more centre backs be brought in, especially one big named centre back, and I think a bigger named fullback or cover at fullbacks would have been welcome as well. So Palace, not a bad window at all. I'm going to give it a flat C, but in my opinion it could have been better. I have put Bournemouth 11th, which is an interesting place for them to be. I think a lot of people expected me and have put Bournemouth themselves a lot lower in their ranking, And I understand why, obviously. You've lost Kepa, you've lost Kerkez, you've lost Huizen, you've lost Sabarni in the same window. That is hard. But if we're being honest, Huizen, they very much knew they were going to lose and they only had him for about a season. Kerkez, they also very much knew they were going to lose. Kepa was only there on loan. And Zabarni, they've got a lot of money from PSG for him. And he is already starting for PSG, so it's pretty clear he probably just is that good. But you've now brought in Petrovic, who is a Chelsea reject, but I mean, that doesn't really say anything about you because what player hasn't passed through Chelsea Football Club at some stage in their career? But in France, he's looked really, really bright, and he had some great games for Chelsea in the Premier League the season before as well. You've brought in at left back Adrien Truffert, who is my favorite signing out of the lot this summer for Bournemouth. He is an absolute crossing monster, and that goes a long way with replacing the output Milos Kerkez had in this Bournemouth side. In at centre back, you've brought in Diakite, who is strong, is physical, but also has the versatility to play both at centre back and at right back, which is just great options for depth. Marco Senesi is still there, who is an absolute defensive contributions monster if you are an FPL favorite like I am. And then you've also brought in the young Milosevic from Sparta Praha. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but if Bournemouth are interested in a young centre back, I would absolutely be on the lookout for him because he might well be absolutely mustard. And the last signing in defence for Bournemouth is the young right back from AC Milan, Jimenez. So not only have they pulled back the age of their backline pretty significantly, but maybe in a year's time people would actually say it got somewhat better this summer, which is absolutely nuts if you think about the fact that Bournemouth got, what will it be, 70 for Sabarni, 50 for Huizen, 60 for Kerkez. That's nearly 200 million on their backline alone. That's absolutely insane. And they haven't really lost that many attackers. Semenyo signed a new contract at the start of the summer. Evan Nilsson is still there. Kluivert is still there. Okay, Dango has now gone, but they got a lot of money for Dango. They brought in Adli. I think it's a great window by Bournemouth, and I think we're already seeing this. We're still in the bottom half, but these are all fantastic windows. It's a C for Bournemouth because whilst they could have done more, and with more I'm thinking about bringing in a 6 to play alongside Tyler Adams because that's something I would have liked to see. Ben Doak is a big risk in my opinion because in the championship he's shown he's got the engine and teams like to give him the ball to provide them with the creativity and get him to run at defenders, but he does lose the ball a lot with doing so, and I think a lot of that part of his game needs to be gotten rid of before he's ready for the Premier League. Next up is Brighton. Now, we all know what geniuses Brighton are in the transfer market, so is it really worth it for me to sit here and be telling them how to conduct their business? No, it is not. But I think the reason this window has been a C is because they did all of their business for this season last summer, which is just the most typical way of operating for Brighton. But the only real big signing they brought in who has been featuring week in, week out for them is Maxime Kuiper, who, if you're a fan of the Belgian national team, you'll be really excited about him. If you've seen him play in the Belgian Pro League or in the Championship last season, you know what he's all about. He's a massively creative left back. They also brought in the likes of Diogo Coppola, who, the Serie A fans are all up in arms about in Italy, because how can it be that a young Italian defender joins Brighton above one of the leading Italian clubs, especially for that little money? I find really strange as well that deal has happened, but Coppola looks absolutely class in my opinion. Karalampos Kostoulas is maybe more of an odd one because Brighton's spending 30 odd million pounds on an 18-year-old striker is something which does raise your eyebrows, but I don't think we're going to see why they've spent that money this season. He's going to have to take some time to adapt to a new environment, but I mean, if you're going to go anywhere to adapt to a new environment in England, I think Brighton is probably the best club to be at. They've also brought in Boscagli on a free from PSV, Ben Watson, who had, I mean, let's just not talk about him, and Yoon. It's a pretty okay window when it comes to players coming in, but if we're talking about the outs, Joao Pedro, they've got a lot of money for. Adingra, I mean, I don't really see why they gave up on him, but sure. And Ciso, he's joined the Blue Co project. Estupinian to AC Milan is probably quite a good deal for every party involved. Barco, Lamptey, Evan Ferguson has gone on loan, O'Reilly has gone on loan, Scherpen has gone to Union, Buenanotte has joined Chelsea on loan in one of the most pointless bits of transfer deals I've ever witnessed in my life. Yeah, when it comes to Brighton, there's not much you can point out in this window and call bad or call a risk. If it does not work out, they probably will cut their losses and not feel a thing. It's a C for Brighton, and I think they will be tearing on the players they bought last season. For example, the likes of Brian Gruda, who looked absolutely incredible against Manchester City. And the next club I would like us to talk about is in fact Manchester City. I know this seems maybe a little low on the list, but hear me out. Ryan Cherki I think is a fantastic addition. No quarrels with that signing, especially for the price they paid for him, given the fact that most wingers went for 50 million at the very minimum. Getting such an unbelievable talent like Ryan Cherki for underneath that price is an absolute bargain. They've also brought in the likes of Aït-Nouri, who I think is something they didn't have, which is a wingback, an out-and-out wingback, not someone who is this inverted fullback type of woke nonsense, as some people might call it. But Aït-Nouri is a different profile to the other players that Pep Guardiola has to his disposal, so that's probably a positive side for Manchester City fans as well. I do, however, have my doubts about the Tiani Reinders deal. First of all, it is a lot of money to spend on a midfielder. Second of all, Tiani Reinders doesn't really do the midfieldery stuff well enough to be as involved or as focused on the other stuff as he is. With the other stuff, I mean, he's great at covering large spaces in short amounts of time, so his strides are unbelievable, and I think Pep Guardiola has tried to be more expansive, has tried to put more space in between of his players this season, so that's clearly something they are working on, but that does bring its own teething issues with it as well, obviously. But also just, I think Tiani Reinders is kind of a champagne version of Wijnaldum, and it might seem like that's a good thing, because Wijnaldum has had an incredible career, but Wijnaldum's underlying statistics told the story of a player who, yes, sacrificed himself for the team, but didn't actually contribute all that much in the team, and was more so there to fill in gaps for other players who stepped out of position, aka Trent Alexander-Arnold. And I think Tiani Reinders will never be as selfless as that, and will kind of want to be one of the guys on the pitch, and I think he has joined maybe one level too high for him to be able to do so. Manchester City, the reason I have them this low in the table, or in my rankings table, mostly is because of their outgoings, and I don't think Reinders is one of these players who neglects or negates the effect of the outgoing players. With the outgoing players, I'm obviously talking about leadership that has left the dressing room. I'm talking about Kevin De Bruyne, who is Mr. Manchester City over the last 10 years. I'm talking about Kyle Walker. I'm talking about Gundogan, Ederson, Jack Grealish, who, I mean, say and love what you want about Jack Grealish, but he's a big character in the dressing room, so he will definitely be missed there. And I don't really think they have brought in that much maturity or big characters in the dressing room. Obviously, they brought in Trafford and Donnarumma, who I'm like, if you're bringing in both, what exactly is the coherent thinking right here? Because in James Trafford, you have a goalkeeper who's come through your own academy, who has now proven himself for a different team to be a massively exciting goalkeeper. He's great with the ball at his feet, which is exactly what Pep wants. So it makes sense for him to join Manchester City and for Manchester City to trigger that buyback clause. But then why sign Donnarumma afterwards? Yes, Donnarumma is probably the only reason Paris Saint-Germain win the Champions League last season. Without him, they don't get past Liverpool and they don't get past Arsenal, and they probably don't get past Aston Villa either. But he is... When it comes to shot stopping, I'd probably only take Thibaut Courtois for one game final. But apart from that, I don't think there's anyone better at the pure shot stopping side of things. It's just the distribution. It's playing with the ball at his feet. That's not Donnarumma's game. And will Pep adjust his demands of a goalkeeper for Donnarumma? Or will Donnarumma have to adjust the way he plays and therefore fall behind James Trafford in the pecking order? Let's not forget also, Donnarumma is only 3 years older than James Trafford is. So it's not like this is a short-term and a long-term signing. Weird business in my opinion. I'm only going to give it a B- for Manchester City. Everton fans, you have made it. How long has it been that you have seen your club inside the top 10 of a table which rates transfer windows gone by? It has been a while since Everton have had an exciting summer, but now here they are. They have made it to the Hill Dickinson Stadium without really getting into any relegation trouble last season, which is exactly what they would have hoped for, and now they are actually allowed to spend a little bit more money, and so they have done this summer. They have brought in the likes of Jack Grealish, who I mean, every single football fan is so unbelievably happy for Jack Grealish that he gets the freedom. I mean, I saw someone point out how funny it is that the whole footballing community is glad that Jack Grealish has been freed from the shackles of Pep Guardiola's limitations and now joined the freedom which is David Moyes' Everton side. So that is really, I mean, that is a really funny narrative if you think about it that way. But he has started like an absolute house on fire. 4 goals out of 2 games, or 4 assists out of your first 2 games is absolutely unbelievable stuff. They've also brought in Keenan Dewsbury-Hall, who I think will be an absolutely fantastic signing for them. Tyler Dibbling, the low sock brigade, is going strong at this club right now. But I mean, having Dibbling, Grealish, Alcaraz, NDI as your creative type of players, that is really, really juicy. Having them play off of, right now it's probably still Beto, but down the line it will be their new signing Barry, who is a David Moyes forward through and through. Maybe they could have done with a bit more physicality in the midfield or in central defense, but bringing in Asnu, a young fullback, bringing in Merlin Raul. They've also brought in Travers on free, but that doesn't really matter. Especially given the fact that they have lost some big wage earners who, in my opinion, didn't contribute enough to the squad, in Dominic Calvert-Lewin, in Doucouré, in Ashley Young. That has freed up some space for these undeniably talented players to come in. And we know David Moyes doesn't like his squads to be too big. So I think this has been a fantastic window by Everton. Now, the next club in our ranking is our beloved Newcastle United. And I know what you're thinking. The Newcastle fans might be thinking 7th is a bit low, and all the other fans might think 7th is a bit high. Well, let me, without going into the players in specifics too much, because later this week or early on next week we will finally be releasing the revival of the podcast, and in there we will be talking into some more depth on our new signings. But Jacob Ramsey, fantastic signing, typical Eddie Howe player. The same goes for Anthony Elanga. Wissa and Voltemade, we knew we had to bring in strikers, more than one striker, because not only Wilson but Isaac left as well. Isaac leaving is one of the more annoying parts to judge in this window, because on the one hand Newcastle had no say in the matter really. I mean, they could have stood firm and not sold him, but who would have really benefited from that situation? But it is your star striker which you are losing, and no matter which way you want to look at it, no matter how hurt or offended you are as a Newcastle United fan, and I think Dan Burn said it absolutely perfectly in his interview over the week with the England camp, where Newcastle fans are unbelievably proud of their club and of their city. And if somebody then throws their toys out of the pram like Alexander Isak did and genuinely just be a big fat crybaby about it, then yeah, a lot of people will be upset with him. And this narrative that Newcastle United are, or Newcastle United fans are delusional for hating Alexander Isak but welcoming Wissa with open arms, my thoughts on that are pretty clear. First of all, for Isak, he treated us in a way which we absolutely did not deserve. We deserved a lot more from him. But he is now gone, and I'm not going to keep on hating him. I want to be as neutral and as objective as I can possibly be. And that includes talking about Liverpool as well. And I also, even though I do not agree at all with the way he's gone about it, players have only one career, and players' careers nowadays are short. So if he really felt this was the only way he could achieve what he wanted to achieve, then fine, go and achieve it. But it's sad how it had to end. And obviously the fact that we sold him this late on into the window, it got to such a public dispute, that meant we kind of had to do our transfer business in the striker role backwards, and got rejected by some of our primary targets first before we got onto Voltemade and Wissa, who we then in the end overpaid for, yes, but I don't really think that matters. First of all, if FFP weren't the thing, money wouldn't really be either for Newcastle United, so it doesn't really make sense to worry about the price tags of players when we know this club can afford them. It's just that PSR limits us in spending the money. But it's also because of the fact that things got backwards. Clubs knew we needed a striker, clubs knew we had money to spend because of Isak and because of us not spending last summer. So I think these are just logical consequences, unfortunately, of one, having rich owners, and second of all, having a brat up front. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the overpaying for those two strikers. I think Thiago in defense is a fantastic addition who can both feature on the right and on the left hand side, which is absolutely what we needed, some more depth. And Ramsdale on a loan deal, fantastic. Yeah, zero risk, I love it. Newcastle United, especially given the fact that if you asked someone or a Geordie at the start of this window what would be the goals for us to improve, they would have said centre back, which we brought in. They would have said right wing, which we brought in. And they would have said maybe look for another striker and another midfielder as well, which we brought in. And then we brought in another striker because our first striker did what he did. And we brought in some competition in between the sticks. So I think it's been a fantastic window for Newcastle United. A window which definitely gives us ground to be fighting with Tottenham for that fifth place in the Premier League. And I think that's exactly where we want to be this season. The last team who I have decided to give a B+ for their transfer window is Chelsea Football Club. Now, I originally had them at an A, mostly because of their selling capabilities. I mean, let's just go over a list of the players they've sold this summer. Madueke has left the club, Nkunku has left the club, Felix, Petrovic, Keenan, Dewsbury Hall, Renato Vega, Armando Broja, Carney Chukwuemeka, Nicholas Jackson has gone, Bashir Humphries has gone, Kepa has gone, and Bettinelli has gone, meaning they've brought in a total of £330 million. Yes, you heard that right. Chelsea this summer, after bringing in 9 players, have made a profit. Yeah, that was the reason I thought about giving Chelsea an A, but then I looked at the players coming in, and even though the players themselves are not bad footballers at all, I'm not saying that, if you asked a Chelsea fan at the start of the window, what would be the positions, like I just asked with Newcastle, what would be the positions you want to see your club improve over this summer? I think they would have said striker, which, I mean, they definitely invested in, but I don't really know why Nicholas Jackson got written off that fast. They probably would have said they should focus on bringing in a central defender, which, to my knowledge, they haven't really done. You might say they should have focused on bringing in a goalkeeper, which they haven't done either. And maybe some Chelsea fans would also add the left wing into that space, which they have added to. Now, that's 2 out of 4 positions gone unupgraded. And I think, listen, Joao Pedro has started brilliantly for Chelsea. Absolutely brilliantly. So I think he will be great. Stevao looks like an unbelievable talent. He really looks exciting. Then you have Jorel Hato, who, I mean, some people seem to think he will find some minutes in the Levi Colwill role, but I don't think he has the physical capabilities to be playing Premier League games at centre back. So I think he will most likely be covered for Marco Correa at that left back slot. But it's those left wingers. Gittens, I think he's kind of a one-trick pony, which is a really harsh thing to say about such a young player, and a player who, I mean, what he has now a month of Premier League experience, so he has time on his side, very much so. But from what I've seen with Borussia Dortmund, he looks like a less hungry Madueke, in my opinion. And for Garnacho, that is a great signing, because I do think for 30 to 40 million pounds, people forget Garnacho is a unbelievably experienced 21-year-old who not only has shown he has got bags of potential, because the things he sometimes pulls out of his ass on a football pitch is absolutely magnificent. But he's also got great statistics for his age as well. A lot of goals, a lot of assists in this league. Again, a lot of experience. I think that's a fantastic signing by Chelsea. They've also brought in Delap, who I think, kind of like Visa and Voltemade, is a good counterpart to Joao Pedro, as he brings a lot of different things to this side. They've also brought in Esugo, Sar, Buenanote, but Esugo and Sar are future signings, probably future sales as well. And Buenanote, I mean, talk about the most pointless loan deals of all time. What is he doing there? Starting us off with the first out of 3 teams who I've rated an A-, or whose business I've rated an A-. It's Tottenham. Now, we have just been hit with the news that Levi is leaving Tottenham Hotspur. He's leaving his role as, I think it was chief of football or football executive. I don't really know what the official title was, but basically was a very huge personality in the Tottenham structure, really. And to be fair, I think he's left them a pretty beautiful parting gift in Xavi Simons, because he is mustard, man. I'm telling you, he is so unbelievably good, and we are going to see next season what he's exactly all about. They've also brought in Kudus, who I think will be great under Thomas Frank. They've brought in Colomwani, who, I mean, I have my doubts about him. I don't think the 80 million Paris Saint-Germain paid for him, I don't think he was ever worth that. He did impress towards the back half of last season whilst out on loan at Juventus, but they couldn't reach an agreement with Paris Saint-Germain over a permanent transfer for him, hence why he's rocked up on deadline day in North London, and I'm really excited to see how he's going to do. Tottenham do also now really just have an exciting roster of attacking talent. Think of the likes of Tel, Richarlison, who has started the season brilliantly, Solanke, Kolomwani, Xavi Simons, Kudus, Kulusevski. Yeah, it's a really, really exciting squad. And I think the loan deal of Palinha is incredible business by them as well. Bringing in Vuskovic, or they probably already brought him in, but he came to the club and then was loaned out again. Bringing in Danso on a permanent, yeah, it's been a pretty great window with Tottenham. The only thing I slightly worry about is missing the leadership that Heung-min Son brought to the dressing room, but when it comes to the star quality of Heung-min Son, I think you've gone a long way in replacing that with Xavi Simons. In at number 4, and I must promise you, Geordies, this is the one and only time I will ever put this club above ours in any sort of table. But you have to admit, Sunderland have had an unbelievable summer. They have brought in an entirely new squad, and I'm not saying it's going to be enough to keep them in the league, not at all, but they've literally brought in Robin Roofs in between the sticks, at left back Masuaku and Renildo, at centre back Alderate, Mukiele, at right back possibly Geertruida. In the midfield they brought in Granit Xhaka, who, I mean, what the fuck? What? Habib Diarra, Noah Sadiki. In attack they've brought in Brian Brobby, they've brought in Adingra, they've brought in... Yeah, I'm sorry, my cat is playing next to me. But they've brought in Adingra, they've brought in Talbi, they've brought in so many... Bertrand Traore. I mean, it really is insane to see them bring in all of these players, and I'm going to be completely honest, all of these players, literally every single signing would be one you'd be really happy with as one of the mid-table clubs in the Premier League, so it's mightily impressive they've all gone to Sunderland. But I do worry about some things. First of all, I don't think they brought in a destroyer. I like a lot of their defenders. Geertruida and Alderate specifically, I think, are fantastic signings. But Xhaka isn't your destroyer. Habib Diarra, I think, is more of a ball progressor, so that means you have a passer and a progressor in your midfield. Will Sadiki be the destroyer? I struggle to see it. That's a big risk coming from Union Saint-Gilloise straight into a relegation threatened side in the Premier League. And then having to be their main number 6, that's a really, really tall ask. Having 11 fantastic players is also not the same as having a coherent squad or a coherent 11, which brings you results every single week. So I think, given the fact that Regis Lebris is also an unproven manager at this level, that's something that remains to be seen. Can he make all of these players gel together into a side that can keep them up? And if they were to get relegated, which I still think is the more likely possibility, a lot of these players, the likes of Mukiele, who recently played for Leverkusen and Paris Saint-Germain, Geertruida, who comes from Leipzig, Brobby, who said no to the likes of Como and Rennes, these players, I mean, I think it's doubtful these players will be ready to drop down a level to the championship, which means, yes, you're probably going to be bringing in a lot of money to make yourself a consistent challenger for promotion if you were to be relegated again. But it also means the players you don't sell are probably still stuck on massive wages, and you haven't really made that much of a profit on the players you do sell. So maybe doing the Ipswich thing and bringing in some more championship proven quality as well, or buying from the top clubs in the second tier, would have been a little bit smarter. Who knows? Number 3, let's talk about them. It's Liverpool, yes. I've not put them 1, and we'll get to why I've not done so, but let's first talk about the players that have come through the door. First of all, Florian Wirtz. What an amazing signing. If we're talking about signings that move the needle for a team, if we're talking about signings that could cement your competitiveness for the next 10 years, Wirtz is pretty much exactly that. He is the heir to Kevin De Bruyne's throne in the Premier League, and I think he's going to be taking that with both arms. He is an unbelievable footballer. They've also brought in Alexander Isak, which, I mean, the fact that you've brought in those two in one summer is already insane. But the fact that you've broken the British transfer record twice in one summer, also spent 90 million on Ekitike, also spent 60 million on Kerkes, and spent 40 million on Frimpong. Yeah, it's genuinely a Galactico style summer by Liverpool. I genuinely mean that. But having a great summer doesn't always translate into trophies the following season. A great summer means you're building for the future, which Liverpool absolutely have. Liverpool have made sure they will be competitive for every single trophy, at the very least for the next 5 years. That's what they've done this window. My big quarrel with the window is, on the one hand, you do not have a single defensively minded fullback, not a single one, or a defensively minded midfielder, because even Ryan Gravenberch is more busy with distributing than with organizing his defense. McAllister, exactly the same thing. So I ideally would have liked to see a 6 be brought in, because their centre backs throughout the season are a lot more busy than the centre backs of other more defensively astute teams, which, I mean, you ideally like your centre backs to be the least busy out of all the defensive minded players in your team. So that is a big worry for Liverpool. And if they were to lose one of their centre backs, and I mean that's not entirely unthinkable given Konate's patchy at best injury record, then you all of a sudden are looking at bringing in an 18-year-old Giovanni Leoni, or bringing back Joe Gomez into the fold, which makes you defensively even frailer. Liverpool are going to win a lot of games this season by a 4-3 scoreline, but it doesn't take a lot for those 4-3s to become 4-4s. Second to last team we can talk about, and I mean, sat here 1 month ago, I would never have told you this team would end up being second in my table for transfer windows, but here they are. It's Nottingham Forest. Nottingham Forest had, in my opinion, an unbelievable summer. Look at the depth they have brought in. Douglas Luiz in midfield. Him and, I mean, before we start talking about players, let's just really quickly go over the fact that yes, Nuno has been sacked. Really strange decision, especially after the miracle he's pulled last season. But Ange is back. Aussie Ange is back in the Premier League. And I mean, let's just all be happy about that. The one thing I'm really interested to see is how Ange will tweak his expansive attacking style of football to suit this Forest squad, because this Forest squad is one which has now, for at least over 12 months, played a really rigid Nuno style of football, so I'm really interested in seeing the transition between those two. But let's talk about these signings. Douglas Luiz as midfield cover, world class. On the wings, they have gone from having to play Callum Hudson-Odoi and Elanga every single week to still having Hudson-Odoi. Okay, Elanga has now joined the most beautiful team in England, so you can't really blame him for that. But you've brought in McAtee on the right, Bakwa on the right. That's now two players who, I mean, ceiling wise probably can get to Elanga's level. And on the left wing, you've brought in Dan Ndoye, who is a fantastic winger as well. You've brought in Amari Hutchinson as cover for Morgan Gibbs-White. You've brought in Kalim Wendo as cover for Chris Wood. That is fantastic. You've brought in Zinchenko at left back, which I believe is a super underrated signing. The only thing I find really weird about this Nottingham Forest team is the Europa League squad. That's pretty much it. Apart from that, fantastic summer, absolutely brilliant, and I think Nottingham Forest are genuinely building something pretty fantastic here. But that brings us to the last club I want to talk about, my number one in this ranking. It's Arsenal Football Club, and yes, I stand behind this ranking. Yes, I believe Arsenal have had the best window out of every single club. It's an A+ rating. I mean, let's just go over the signing, shall we? Every single video that was made about Arsenal's and about Arsenal's transfers for this summer, it was about their strikers. It was about what striker do Arsenal need to bring in. And they have decided to go with Gyökeres. Now, he gets a lot of stick for only scoring his goal against weaker opposition, but first of all, I don't think that's a bad thing, because he is still scoring you bucket loads of goals, which is, at the end of the day, the only thing you really want from your striker. But second of all, I think Gyökeres can score against those sides, which is fantastic, because Arsenal in recent years have lost the Premier League title by losing to those teams more often than losing to the top teams, because I don't think over the past 3 years there is a single team which has picked up as much points against quote-unquote cartel big six sides in the Premier League. But the fact that they haven't got themselves over the line means they have lost points to, I mean, off the top of my head, the likes of Bournemouth, West Ham, Fulham, Aston Villa. They have all picked up points against Arsenal at crucial periods in the past. So having a striker like that who scores against lower opposition on a consistent basis really isn't a bad thing for Arsenal. They also have brought in Madueke, who is absolutely in love with the box. Eze, who, I mean, I'm absolutely in love with the kind of player Eberechi Eze is, and who can't be. He is fantastic. He is beautiful to watch. He loves the fact that he is at Arsenal right now, which, I mean, makes you happy just even playing football. I think, unless you're a Spurs fan, you absolutely love Eberechi Eze. Zubimendi, I think, is the cream of the crop when it comes to these signings. He will transform the way he plays, or Arsenal play football, because I think in the modern day, tactics are less and less important, and the tempo of the game is a more decisive factor in whether you win or lose. And I think a player like Martin Zubimendi can dictate the tempo of a game completely on his own, so that's unbelievably exciting as well. A midfield of Zubimendi, Rice and Ødegaard just is so unbelievably balanced, and it's absolutely world class. I genuinely believe that. And then you looked at the rest of their squad and maybe thought, yeah, bringing in a backup goalkeeper and backup centre backs could maybe be an option. Did all of that. Brought in Kepa, who, I mean, Kepa for less than 5 million is a bargain. This is still the most expensive goalkeeper of all time we're talking about. Bringing in Piero Hincapié and Mosquera as your two centre back depth options. Both of them were starters for, I mean, Valencia had a horrific first half of the season, but after Corbaron came in, they absolutely killed it, and he was a part of that. And I mean, Hincapié at Leverkusen was a part of the invincible side, so having them both as backup options, yeah, it's been a fantastic window for Arsenal. That's the fact that I've also put them first for winning the Premier League this season is, whereas Liverpool have upgraded or replaced a lot of their starting 11, Arsenal have only really strengthened. Arsenal have only really added to what they already had. The players that have left Arsenal are Jorginho, Zinchenko, I mean, a certain midfielder whose name I won't be speaking here on the channel to keep the integrity of the channel high. Kivior, these are all second string players, and yeah, Arsenal have gotten a lot stronger for it. Look at that Arsenal bench and tell me it isn't frightening to be winning or drawing 0-0 and seeing those names come on the pitch. Anyway, that was my ranking of every single Premier League club's transfer window this summer. If you did go on to make it this far, I really want to thank you, because this video has cost me a lot of time and a lot of effort, but I love making this type of content for you guys. I hope you sat back, relaxed. Please let me know in the comment section below if you agree with my assessment on your club's transfer window. Do you think any of your club signings have gone under the radar? Please do let me know as well in the comment section down below, or on social media, Magpie247, on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You know the drill, and I would like to see you in the next video. Have a good one.